sweet compassion when my soul's in need. I find compassion for friends and enemies. My own compassion is where my spirit breathes. Oh.
Live from Santa Barbara, welcome to Compassionate Connection. I'm your hostess, Gigi Amor. The purpose of our show is to share with you how to connect compassionately within ourselves and with others when we choose to learn the language of compassion. Direct from our hearts, we can transform and enrich our own lives and relationships. This is a language of thought, language, of course, and communication. And that will help us to attain a more wonderful life and world. Now, with that being said, tonight we're going to explore some other matters. It's going to be a very exciting show. This is going to be When is a Relationship Over? Part 1. So we're going to explore this with our beautiful, wonderful guest, Susan Allan, who's here with us tonight. Thank you for coming, Susan.
Thank you.
I'm really excited. This is going to be a show about so many things that we all are dear to with our hearts, our relationships, a big investment.
And one not to bother with an investment anymore.
There you go. When to cash in on that,
right.
perhaps.
Exactly.
Well, I'm going to tell the audience a bit about you, Susan. Susan Allan is America's leading marriage and divorce coach and the founder of the Marriage Forum and Heartspace. Susan is the author of 3 books, and Susan is also a certified mediator and has created the 6-part conversation that allows us to create peaceful and cooperative conversations with everyone under every situation, even during separation and divorce. Susan has also been seen on Fox News and on hundreds of television and radio shows, demonstrating the results that we can create when we transform the way we think, listen, speak, and act in focus on solutions instead of on problems. Yes. Susan offers a complimentary 1-hour telephone session so that everyone can transform their lives, their families, and their future. Oh, you have my attention here, Susan. So this is going to be exploring when is the relationship over. And I know that, Susan, you have told me that it's usually way over before people realize it's over. And you've already mentioned that the divorce rate is now 60%, and second and third marriages are even less successful than, of course, the first marriages. So I'm thrilled that tonight you will be teaching us the #1 part of the series on how to make crucial decisions about ending a relationship without taking years out of your life. So that sounds very enticing. We'll get right to that. Oh boy, Susan, we have a lot of ground to cover.
And this is our favorite subject, you and me.
I have quite a few people tuning in tonight.
We love talking about relationships, yes.
That's true. Well, now, what I first would like to ask you is that most of us do think that our relationships are perfect, but great, except wonderful, yet, and we keep the habit going. And how does that affect our relationships?
So if you're doing this internal voting thing, you know, you're doing this internal judging, criticizing. I spoke to a client today and I said to him, you're sounding a lot like the hanging judge. So that energy, that approach, of course, is death to the relationship. So no matter who it is that you're dating, if you're constantly looking for what's not working, I guarantee you that you're going to find it, of course. You can judge anything. You can go to any museum, you can go to any movie, you can go to any concert, you can go to any performance, any restaurant, any vacation, and if you show up looking for what's wrong with it instead of what's right with it, you're going to be very dissatisfied. You're going to want your money back. So if you're in a relationship, you want to look at what's right about it, and then you want to look in a very positive way at, okay, how can I make it better? So how can I make this better is the opposite from but, yet, except.
Thank you, Susan. I really like that type of mind frame and how to go about achieving that. So is there something about your partner, let's say, that really bothers you and you are trying to fix the partner? Is that going to work?
You know, it works for a house, it works for a building, it can even work for a car. It doesn't work for anything that's alive. Because everything that's alive has its own purpose, its own motivation, its own life force. So if you approach a living entity, whether it's a human being, whether it's an animal, a pet, if you approach us that way, then why would we want to stick around? You know, why would even the dog want to stick around? The dog could go somewhere else and get unconditional love and appreciation. Why would the dog want to stick around and constantly be criticized and judged, and you have to do this, you can't do that? And of course, for people, they're going to last even less long.
Thank you. That's a huge reality for everyone to pay attention to. Sometimes we get into habits that we don't realize. So I'm curious, what is your response to people who tell you they're settling for their partner? How does that work out?
Well, clearly they're not, because if you tell me that you're settling, that's a complaint. So if you're telling me you're settling for your partner, and if you know me well, or if you're a client of mine or a former client, you can hear me saying, well, no, you're not. So if you have a partner, you're either thrilled with the partner, you're mostly thrilled with the partner, or you're debating whether you're going to stay or go because enough of your needs are not met and some of your needs are met, which is what we call torn. So if half of your key needs are met and half of your key needs are not met, we say that you feel torn. And believe me, I've been in relationships like that. Gigi certainly has. Most of us have been. The person is fabulous and awful in your life. Maybe for someone else, that person is perfect. But for you, it's just torture because sometimes it's wonderful and sometimes it's awful. Well, in that case, you're not settling and you can't settle and there's nowhere to go but elsewhere.
That's very clear. And yes, I confess, I've been there. Not anymore, with your help, hopefully.
That's right. We knew this, though, right? We knew it. You're human. You've been through this. We've all been through this.
Okay, exploring this, if your partner complains about your weight or about your job or about the level of education or about your cooking, are these valid complaints?
You know, if your partner's complaining about something about you, the question you want to ask is, why is your partner complaining instead of motivating you and finding out if, in fact, these are changes that you would enjoy making? So it's not about whether you should be a better cook or not. It's not about whether you should lose weight or not. It's not about whether you should finish college or go to grad school or not. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with why is your partner, this person who supposedly loves you more than anyone else loves you in the world, why is this partner complaining to you? That's the key issue. You do not want to be in a relationship with someone who complains. Now, if someone comes to you and says, honey, I know you've always wanted to finish college. You didn't have enough money to do it when we got together. We didn't have enough money when we had the children. But I remember that 6 years ago, this is what you wanted. Would this still be important to you? Do you want us to talk about it? So then it's all about you and your decision. It's not your partner saying that you're broken and need to be fixed. And that's the key. You cannot be in a relationship that's going to be satisfying to either of you if even one of you believes that it's broken and it needs to be fixed. That's the takeaway here.
Thank you. I really understand that. That's very clear for us all.
And I should say that we learned this, Gigi and I, by fixing ourselves, and it still didn't work.
And there you go. A lot of time and energy can be saved if you just pay attention to these words.
I mean, really, when I had to finally learn how to cook so that my fiance Alexis would be happy, and then I'm in New York and I make the best dinner, and he says, nobody has made a chicken as wonderfully as you. Well, it was his mother's recipe. Even my mother never made a chicken as wonderfully as you. And then he still gave me a hard time about something the next day. Like, give me a break.
I agree with you, Susan. Let's motivate and inspire. Very encouraging.
And have
for
I
us.
made that chicken recipe since? No, I haven't.
She threw it out the window along with the guy.
Like,
Oh, okay. That works. Now, moving forward, what if you take the complaint seriously and you make a big change in your life does that really solve the problem? And then can you usually have a great relationship?
You know, I can only say it never worked for me. You can call me, you can have your free session, you can ask me to list 9 or 10 times in my life. Now, it's funny, when I was in high school, there was this girl who was at a different school. She was a friend of my best friend at the time, and my best friend was commenting, you know, this girl, Christina, changes the kind of shoes she wears depending who she's dating. So I said, what do you mean? Well, she wears high heels with one guy, and she wears low heels with another guy, and she wears flats with another guy. Now, that to me is considerate, because in those days, it was important not to be taller than the guy. So that was considerate. But if she changed her hair color and her weight and the kind of clothes she wore and her personality, now we start to look at somebody who's really, you know, pretty desperate and confused, and that won't work. So I want you to understand there's a difference between being considerate and compassionate and caring and trying to recreate yourself just because you're hopeful that by changing who you are, that you would deserve love. That's why we do that, and that never works.
That could have saved me a lot of time and energy, Susan.
I know, because,
Exactly.
you know, you're a wonderful human being, I'm a wonderful human being, and if people couldn't see it, they weren't the right wonderful human beings for us. It's just that simple, you know? Some people are not capable of unconditional love, and that's what you're looking for. You're looking for unconditional love. That means you're looking for someone who's capable of loving you, capable of appreciating you. And a lot of people are not. So that's what the key is.
Building on the positive all the way through.
Yeah.
So therefore, if complaining isn't love, and if nagging is not love, how do you define love?
When having your partner's needs met is as important to you as having your own needs met, that's what I call love. That can be in friendship, that can be in a family, that can be with a pet, and that can be with a lover. That is when your heart is open and you are capable of love. And if someone is not capable of that, then my experience is that they're too frightened. And if you're not capable of that, again, you're too frightened. And I can show you how to move beyond fear to love.
That would be a great formula for many people.
Formula. And I'm writing a new book called The Relationship Equation, which I could easily call The Relationship Formula, and maybe I will.
Oh, there we go.
I was going to call it The Relationship Code, and that seemed a little iffy. So it might be formula. Thank you.
Oh, I like that. Oh boy, something to read. Something hot. So now moving forward again, how does acceptance enter into love?
We're human. We're not a computer program. Therefore, it's a little bit more complicated and takes a little more time to evolve. So if you are capable of unconditional love, then you're capable, at least for a while, of acceptance. So now if somebody's dancing with you and they're stepping on your toe consistently, you're just going to say, why don't we sit down? So there's some things you can't accept, right? If somebody continues to cook for you and the food is inedible and you get sick, or they keep preparing food for you that you're allergic to, or if you're a vegetarian and they keep making you prime ribs, then there's certain things that it just doesn't make sense to accept. You have to find out what's going on here. However, if you're with someone and you love her and you love him, and the relationship is, as Adyashanti, the great enlightened master, said, 95% wonderful, and you've talked about what you're going to do about the extra 5%, then you have to have a certain amount of patience and support that person and motivate them, and all of that is tied up with acceptance.
Oh, I love the sound of it. It is something that can be accomplished, and what a gift that is. Just a little help once in a while, perhaps. Now, what in fact would happen when there has been infidelity? Can a couple really create trust again?
This is my favorite subject. In relationships and all that, this is my favorite subject. Okay. How many people have called me because there has been infidelity, either they or their partner were unfaithful, and now they are going off to marriage counseling, or they've been dragged off to marriage counseling, and supposedly the idea is that you're now going to fix the relationship. Guess what? If one of you was unfaithful, it's because a number of your key needs are not being met. And the good news is that you didn't just leave. So this is actually a compliment, that you didn't just pack and leave. You actually care enough about your partner to stay. However, your partner, the one who did not cheat, needs to acknowledge that a lot of your needs haven't been met. So if you're able to communicate about this in a motivating way, and if your partner is interested and willing to hear you, then changes can be made and the relationship can transform. If, however, you're not able to speak honestly about your needs that haven't been met, and if your partner is not willing or able to hear you, then honestly, there's no possibility. So if you say to your partner, I promise I'll never do it again, please don't do that, because it's nonsense. And if you're a partner hearing this from someone and you're not making changes and he or she isn't making changes, please know this is nonsense. You can practically guarantee that it's going to happen again. So you can transform it, you can get beyond it, but not in the way most experts tell you. It just won't happen.
Thank you, Susan. That's something to really look into, I know, with you on this particular subject. Very important. And I also know that you teach us that it only takes one person with new skills to create, to transform any relationship. Does that also mean that it takes only one partner to end a relationship?
Absolutely. And it only takes one partner to end it in a peaceful and loving way. You know, we don't want to have you end it in a negative way. We want to have you end it in a peaceful way. And really end it with respect and compassion and consideration.
That sounds very charming, and I appreciate that you are a peacemaker, so everybody needs to know that as well about you. Now, what and why is it so important that if we end a relationship that we do it with peace and respect for the other person?
Because they'll get even otherwise. You know, you can count on the fact that they're going to get even. If you are respectful, if you're considerate, if you're compassionate, then you can end it in peace. Otherwise, you've got a big problem.
I like that. And you'll end up with some health problems and other issues for sure.
Yeah, you bet.
Now, what about why do some spouses argue and fight all the time or even complain a lot all the time? Why do they stay together?
Some people don't understand the value of peace. They just don't understand the value of peace. They didn't have it when they grew up. They've never seen it as adults. And they're just recreating the miserable relationship of their childhood. And in fact, you know, psychiatrists can tell you that even though you would think a child who has grown up in torment and torture, you would think that that child would want only peace when he or she gets older. But in fact, that's not the way the human brain works. Unless the human brain has really been evolved, unless the person has done a lot of work on himself or herself, they just keep creating misery. They keep bringing crazy people into their lives because they don't know another way of interacting. That's the tragedy.
That is a tragedy. So if someone out there is listening to this, it can be shifted, it can change. So is it true that most relationships end after they have been dragging along for years? And how do people know when the end has actually come?
Well, there's no definite, you know, your end when you just can't take it anymore might be different from my end and I can't take it anymore. But you and I are, you know, we're dear, dear friends, so maybe it would be about the same. But everybody has basically a boiling point, right?
Yes.
And at that moment, it's already too late. You should have ended it before then. But if you don't have the skills to motivate and inspire somebody, then you're really in trouble. So the key is not to wait till you get to this boiling point. In fact, I was speaking to a friend of mine when I got to the studio tonight, and we were talking about tonight's show topic. And he said, oh, when is a relationship over? Oh, you mean when she says, I never want to see you again? No, that's somebody who's just really angry. That doesn't mean it's over. So then he said, oh, you mean it's over when she says, and I'm deleting you from my phone? No, that's just someone who's very angry. So somebody who's very, very angry, you don't want to ever let the person get to that point. There's no benefit, but that's what people do if they don't have any skills, if they don't have communication skills.
There we go. What an unhealthy, unhappy place to be.
Yeah, sadly.
So some people, I know that their lover or spouse is cheating and they continue the relationship. And sometimes people enter relationships at the first hint of infidelity. So could you explain why that is?
Fear. You know, there are people who walk away and never look back. And they don't have another relationship, you know. There are people who stay forever in a bad relationship. You know, it's a level of what is it that makes you feel frightened? So people are frightened to be alone. People are frightened of intimacy. People are frightened of vulnerability. So you just give me a couple of sentences about anyone and I'll tell you what's going on. But the bottom line is, people up to a certain age, you know, people in their 40s, 50s, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, whatever, they enjoy intimacy, they enjoy sex, they enjoy affection, they enjoy love, they want to be in some kind of relationship. When people get older, it's different because your biochemistry changes and your brain changes. But when you're young, if you're not in an intimate relationship and if you haven't been in one in a long time, the odds are that something really frightening and really upsetting happened to you some time ago and you didn't have the skills, you didn't have the tools to move beyond it, and you feel hopeless that the next relationship is going to be peaceful and joyous and loving and safe. And that's just because you don't have the skills you need. not because of them, but because of you. So if you want to have a life that's more satisfying, the good news is you just have to learn the skills.
So there we go. It is possible to have your needs met with another person with really taking some time and effort into learning the skills that Susan would love to share with you. I know we're going to go into this show clip in a minute, and I know you want everyone to remember that this is a really funny example of what does not work. And so, Susan, I wonder if you'd be willing to set up the video for us.
Yes, I am so excited. We have another clip of the Mrs. Gary show. And again, my dear friend, Mary Beth Pape, is the producer, and she's also the star. She's Mrs. Gary. So please enjoy it.
Yeah, we used to live in Bel Air. My husband, Gary, said, honey, I'm miserable. I'm going to become a knife sharpener. What am I supposed to do? He's happy.
Tonight, Mrs. Gary and Gary will be sitting at the dinner table of Claire and David. Claire and David still live in Bel Air. And there is no way that Gary won't be remembering this and won't want to have it. Oh, shit. It's the cops. And they're talking to the weird neighbors. Mama, I can't talk to you right now.
Miss Gary.
Your Honor, you're
Detective Johnson.
Yes,
What is this?
Oh, don't mind them. Don't mind them. They're here to speak to Gary.
I have a couple questions. I want to ask you.
Why don't we have some coffee? I find that coffee actually relaxes people.
He's secure. He's not going to come out.
Are you afraid of dogs?
I'm not afraid of dogs. No. I just, let's start at the beginning. You're Mrs. Gary.
Yes.
Your first name? Your first name.
Dolores.
All right. And your husband's.
Gary.
His first name?
Gary.
His first name.
Gary.
Your husband's name is Gary.
No.
I need to
Silverstein.
All right. I'm sorry. How do you know the Kensingtons?
You don't have more people coming.
That's not us. Do something about that dog!
Please! It's the neighbor's dog.
What is the noise I keep hearing?
Don't let it bother you. It's the neighborhood.
No,
it's
I'm
where
hearing
we live. That's Gary. He's sharpening the knife. I'm sorry to yell at you.
Okay. Last night you were at the home of Claire and David Kensington, is that correct?
They had valet. Well, we weren't going to use the valet, not in the knife mobile.
What's a knife mobile?
The knife mobile, it's what Gary drives in. It's horrendous. We parked about a mile away, and I got about 3 steps, and my heel breaks. Gary goes back into the knife mobile, and he fixes it using a stiletto and a C-clamp. And it works, except that I clink every other step.
I clink up the driveway. Claire greases at the door. She's drunk. She lets us in, and the first thing I see are 12 tables, 20 place settings each.
Knives everywhere. So I say, I'm going to go use the ladies' room. But really, I go in, the knives,
You went
and
to the
I've
restroom,
got
and
about
then you
150
came
knives.
into the dining room instead.
I didn't go to the restroom. I excused myself to pick up the knives. Gary can't see a knife without talking about it. I have about 150 knives in my grasp when who comes into the room but Sylvia Braxton? Is she down there on the list somewhere? She's a troublemaker. I don't like that woman. And she starts to say to me, oh, you should know your place. I have 150 knives in my grasp. It was terribly embarrassing. You are nouveau riche, she says to me. And as she's saying this to me, I'm looking over her shoulder, and I see her husband, Ed Braxton, write that down, Ed Braxton,
Coming out of the bedroom door with a female staff member zipping up his fly.
Take that, you fucking Mongol shit machine!
Yet I feel really great here. So go ahead. So you're at this party.
So the next thing I know, Claire goes up to Ed and yells, you slut! Now, detectiveship. Wouldn't you say that to the girl?
Would I really? I mean, who's the slut? That's the question. I
Well,
mean,
that's the question, but it doesn't matter, because then the next thing I know, Claire has a gun, and she's shooting it up to the ceiling. And everyone hits the deck, but I can't hit the decks. I got about 150 knives in my grasp. Do you know how much noise that would make on the floor?
I can just imagine.
It would be terrible.
I don't
So
really,
I just closed my
I don't
eyes.
really like my job.
And when I open my eyes, there's Gary, and he's looking at the knives, and get this, he says, there's no way that I can sharpen all these knives before the first course. And besides, these people are crazy, and I'm getting you out of here. And so I went clinking down the driveway, too petrified to let go of the knife, and that's why you're here.
Yeah.
You're on a ship.
I'm just a detective. That was nice that your husband, he took care of
He
you.
loves me.
But other than that grinding sound, I don't hear anything. I feel free. I feel kind of free. I feel like... What color is that in your hair?
Medium auburn, number 111.
In a pixie chic, you would look fantastic. Come another slide. You know, the 111 is fine. I mean, it's fine generally speaking, but you know, you have some very delicate features here. What I'd want to do is I'd want to shape it a little more this way and give it a little more body, right? A little more body. But we've got to get this color.
This is just like the old days. Gary, put the knives down. Bring scissors.
We love the Mrs. Gary show here. We just love it. Now, that's chaos, right? Okay, some people call that chaos. Some people call it exciting and fun. So remember, as we're talking about this, it's like it may not work for Gigi and may not work for me. We like a lot of peace. But see how everybody was kind of rolling with it. That was so fascinating about that episode. She's like rolling with it, and even, you know, this terrific actor who, you know, plays the police officer and often plays police officers on TV, he's like not judging it. He's not, you know, creating this wall. He ends up rolling with it, and that's the important thing. So obviously this is an exaggerated story, but you have to be able to roll with what's happening if you want to improve it. That's the key.
Perfectly put, Susan. I enjoyed that so much. Now, how do you go about teaching clients to use their whole brain, their left and their right brain, to select a partner who truly could be their lifelong partner?
So the key is, of course, you have to develop whole brain function. So you have to actually be able to use your whole brain. And, you know, that's tricky. And in the next couple of questions, we're going to get to that. But really analyzing what you're looking for before you get into a relationship is what most people don't do. They just really don't do it. So you may think that you want somebody who's beautiful and sexy, or you might want somebody who's very smart and very successful, or you might want somebody who's very spiritual and meditates and peaceful, or you might want somebody who's a really hard worker, has a great work ethic, you know, and can stand shoulder to shoulder with you. Okay, but now none of that sounds bad. Most people would say, okay, that sounds good, but you're not likely to find somebody who has all of those qualities in the same person any more than you're likely to have all of that. So you have to decide in terms of priority what is key for you. And then you have to be sure that you evolve yourself so that you're likely to deserve this incredible, fabulous person that you haven't met yet, who you are looking to bring into your life. So it's not that you're asking him or her to be fabulous and perfect. It's not that you're asking that they would be more than you. You are committed to being your most wonderful self for the rest of your life, I would hope. And I know that for me, I've spent every single minute and every single dollar that I possibly could working to evolve myself, to improve myself, becoming more loving, becoming more peaceful, becoming more intelligent, becoming healthier, becoming this, that, and the other thing, because that's what's important to me. And any partner you have, that's going to be important to him or her.
Wonderfully put. I'm working on a lot of that myself. It's a lifelong project to continue to evolve. Now, can you walk us through the clients that are very creative?
And how they do it?
Yes.
Yes, sure. And Fred, if you would put up the backwards Z, that would be really fantastic, very helpful. So this is a system that I created from Herman Brain Dominance. This is something I've added to it. That learning how to think using your whole brain is something that very, very few people do. And if you're creative, you're going to start in the creative part of the brain. So if you see the right part of the brain, the upper right, the pale yellow part, that's where creative people start. And the danger is that if you're creative, you're going to be very tempted to go from there down to the red quadrant, the emotional quadrant. And then you're going to be tempted to just do things, go to the green quadrant. And let me tell you, it's a death march. Don't do it. It won't help. So what you've got to train yourself to do instead is go from the upper right, the yellow quadrant, the ideas, big picture, generic, outside the box thinking, and then force yourself over to the upper left, the facts, the figures, the dollars, the numbers, the rational brain. You've got to think, okay, I'm looking for somebody who's a lot like Jane, who I used to know. You know, and Jane was lovely, and she was pretty, and she was an art student, and Jane was fantastic. But now you've got to rationally think about it. Well, you know, if I'm a stockbroker and I've got a girlfriend named Jane who is an artist, are we going to be able to function socially? I doubt it. One of us is going to have to really change. You can't assume that Jane, this is a fictitious person, that she's going to be willing to give up behaving like an art student or even an artist because you have to socialize as a stockbroker. It's going to be tricky. Now, I'm not saying it can't be done, but you have to logically analyze what the odds are. Then you would move to the lower right, the emotional quadrant, look at your feelings and look at her feelings. Do you care about each other enough to really make those changes? Do you care about each other enough to really be excited about making the changes? You can't make changes in your life unless you're excited about it, because you'll make that other person pay, to quote Marshall Rosenberg. And then and only then can you move to the green quadrant, the action plan, the to-do list, and really look at what you would have to do if you wanted a relationship with this person to work or that person to work or the other person to work. What would you have to do in changing the way you think? What would you have to do in developing new behaviors yourself? What would you have to do in motivating your partner? And that's a whole long list. I could talk for hours about that.
Thank you for briefing us on this. And I wonder if you can show us how to do that if someone is really left-brained.
Great. So if somebody's really left-brained, thank you, Fred. This is, again, a system I created for left-brain people to think. This is the backwards C. So you start in the blue quadrant because it's rational, logical, analytical, data-driven, dollars-driven. So you start there. I want somebody who has this quality, that quality, the other quality. But then you have to force yourself to look at the creative part of it. Well, where might I find someone like that? Where might I be likely to find someone who is just like me? Well, I might look in the office, but you know, that's going to have certain complications. But I could go to some sort of an event. I could go to some kind of a seminar that's about, let's say, financial planning. I could go to some sort of a weekend whatever where people who are learning more might learn more, but it's also in a resort environment. So now you've got the facts and the figures of who you're looking for. You've forced yourself to be creative, to look outside the box a little bit. Now then, you would again go to the lower right, the red quadrant. How do you feel? How does she feel? Well, maybe she is just like you, but maybe she's looking for a musician. Well, that's not going to work. Maybe what she likes most is music, and maybe you're a stockbroker who has a hobby as a musician. Maybe you even have a band. Well, then that looks like you two could be very excited about being together. But you have to look at it in a creative way, not just try to go from, you know, A to B and not think about how it's really going to affect this other person. And then if it looks like there's enough that's going to work, it looks like you're willing to make compromises and evolve, each of you, then you have a very clear action plan. Got a relationship.
I like the sound of that. So really think things through with the whole brain. If a client is in the middle of a relationship, it's hard to learn all of this. Is it easier to learn it when a relationship is just beginning?
If people would be that interested. But the truth is, the only time most people are interested in learning about how to improve a relationship is when a relationship is causing you pain. That's humans. We don't learn unless we're in pain. I don't know why. So I would say to you, oh yes, that's a great idea. And even when clients call me and said, you know, I'm calling you and I've just taken a 3-week hiatus from my relationship. And now I'm really serious. Now I really want to work on my relationship. I'll say, great, how many days this week do you want to speak? Oh, 1? So, you know, if you're taking a 3-week hiatus from your relationship and you really want to know, should I stay or should I go in 3 weeks, then that's a commitment. And since I've spent $1 million learning all this stuff, and I'm not saying you have to, but a commitment of an hour a week isn't a commitment. And I only ask the client speak to me twice a week if they've got a real problem, and then work in between sessions. But, you know, it takes a real committed human being to be willing to do that. And normally, if you're in a relationship or there's someone you'd love to go out with, that's when you're most likely to call me and hire me and work with me. And if you're in between relationships, it doesn't usually happen as much.
Thank you, Susan. Oh my, it's sure worth getting yourself in that mind frame of being able to enjoy and get what you want. So my question to you is everyone capable of unconditional love?
Every human being is, but every human brain is not. So you have to evolve your brain. And it isn't easy. That's what I am most interested in teaching. And very, very few people teach this. So it is the most exciting thing to me. When you come to me and you say, I have a problem, I don't know what to do about my relationship, you know, I really love him, but he's impossible, or I love her, but she's driving me crazy, then I say, okay, what works? Let's start with what works. Now, if what works is this tiny little list, then probably it isn't worth it to you. But if what works is a good, solid, long list of wonderful qualities and attributes, and there are just a couple of things that drive you crazy, then we can turn that around. We can either turn around your attitude about it, which is very powerful, or we can turn around the actual situation, or both. And it's up to you. How many tools and skills do you want to acquire?
Very encouraging. Is passion enough for a lifelong relationship?
Not at all. And you know, Joanne Woodward, who was married to Paul Newman, who most women think is, you know, pretty divine, and she said, good looks last for 1 year. No, I take that back. Sex appeal lasts for 1 year. Good looks keeps you interested for 10 years. And interesting conversation lasts a lifetime. And it's interesting, I met Paul Newman, and I didn't find him even slightly interesting in person. Because the way he performed on stage, you know, and the way he was in the movies was very sexy. And in person, I found him, just like all the other people who went to Yale, who I met, and he went to Yale, it's very dry, very serious, no fun. So it was interesting to me. You know, it was really interesting to me. That's not what I expected. But that was the real Paul Newman, not this, you know, dishy, sexy guy and cat on a hot tin roof.
Well, fortunately for Joanne, it worked out, right?
She obviously was more interested in a very, very serious guy, which is fascinating to me. When you see, behind the curtain, you find out who it is. Yeah, so you have to get to know the real person, not just the facade, not just the party manners, and you have to like that too. It's very interesting because what Rita Hayworth said about herself, why did her marriages not last? And she said, because they married Gilda, but then they woke up with me. And that's a key part. Should I stay or should I go? Well, it depends. Did you ever really love that person as he or she really is? Or did you, like so many of us, fall in love with a facade that was never real?
Well, we're talking about having it be real and long term.
Absolutely.
Now, if a couple if they really are in love in mind, body, and spirit, how can they ensure a fantastic life together?
You have to commit yourself to working on your brain so that you are more peaceful, more joyous, more loving, more compassionate, more understanding. If you're, in my opinion, really loving, and then you're committed to one another's needs being met, you are not expected to be a psychic, and at the same time, you have to really be able to put yourself into the other person's brain. You have to really be able, certainly after a while, not just to say, what would you like for dinner, but know what that person's favorite meals are. I was working with a guy some time ago, and he wanted to save his marriage. So I said, well, if you're the one who does the cooking, and he said he did, then tell me, what is your wife's favorite meal? And he didn't know. I said, but you've been cooking all the meals for the family for years? Yes. And I said, well, I want you to really look back, really think back. What did you make in the last month that your wife really loved? And he said, oh, whatever it was. I said, so did you ever make that before? Oh, yes. Did she enjoy it before? Oh, yes, she really liked that. Okay, great. So let's hypothesize that that's one of your wife's favorite dishes. So when your wife has a bad day, that would be a good thing to make, and say to her, honey, I'm making this for you because I know you really enjoyed it before, and I know you've had a bad day, tough day today. That means even more than just throwing the meal in front of her, because it's about connecting compassionately. And everybody in a long-term relationship needs to know that someone really cares about them, because why would you stay with that person otherwise?
A lot of consideration, even in the food. I enjoy that story. Well, it's a true story. So I'm curious how people can move forward to a new relationship and do it in that respectful way.
Sometimes, and this is part one of a series, so sometimes that the relationship's really over. Now, I believe that if you look back, you will find a time when your partner said that he or she had had enough too. Because I believe that if you got together and it wasn't an arranged marriage, if you got together with each other because it was mutual, there was a mutual level of attraction and desire and interest. If you have had it up to here, then first of all, look back to see the last time your partner had it up to here. And that's what you want to talk about. You want to talk about not that you've had enough and you're leaving and you're out of here and curse words. You want to start to think again compassionately about all your partner's needs that have not been met. And that's what you want to talk about if you want a peaceful exit. That is the key.
Thank you. That's very nice, very peaceful. I like that. How can people work with their children when the end is coming so that the peaceful way is involving the children as well?
for the first point, you have to make it clear that their life is not going to change in a bad way. That they are still going to have two parents who adore them. That they're going to have two wonderful homes instead of just one, unless there's one partner getting sole custody. That they are going to have more love, not less love. And of course, you have to make decisions that make that true. You've got to make decisions so that their school has stability, their school experience has stability, that their homework gets the support of one or both of you who's good at it, whatever it is, and that you keep your children and your pets as the primary focus of this shift, because it's not their fault that you don't know how to get along. It's not their fault that you may have made a poor choice in the beginning, and it's not their fault that you now don't want to acquire the skills that might allow reconciliation. Not that there's anything wrong, in my opinion, with ending a relationship, but it's excruciating if you don't consider the needs of the children and the pet as at least as important as your own needs.
Really nice, very compassionate. Everybody's involved. And so finally, how important is it to children to stay in a marriage?
Well, I know we have a number of minutes, so you'll keep me on track, okay?
Yes.
So in any of the divorce mediations that I've done, and I've done a lot of them, and in any of the reconciliations that I've done, and I've done a lot of them, or divorce coaching, I've done, even more of that. The real question is, how do you meet everybody's needs? Now, the way to meet everybody's needs is either the backward Z or the backward C. It doesn't matter, but you've got to make sure you hit all of the quadrants. So if you're a creative person, then you're going to start looking, and you're going to start looking at the backward Z, and okay, the idea, the big picture is we're going to get a divorce, we're going to be fine, the kids are going to be fine, the dogs and the cats are going to be fine. But now you've got to look at the facts. So the next thing I want you to do is talk to either a certified divorce financial analyst or a CPA who specializes in divorce to make sure there's enough money for two homes. So a lot of people have to get their finances together before they separate. A lot of people have to live in the same home, one of you in the den, one of you on the living room sofa, because you can't afford two separate households. That's a very important thing. If you're listening and you have financial problems and you're married, please know that the problems are going to get worse if you separate, because now you need two separate but equal households, because each of you presumably want to have the children sleep over. If you're having a problem in your marriage because there's not enough sex, you're probably going to have to live with less sex when you separate until you have a new relationship, right? If you're wanting a divorce because you want more support, more emotional support, getting a divorce means you have to walk through the fire. You're going to have less support in the beginning. Unless you go from a bad marriage into an exquisite new relationship. And let's face it, the odds are very slim. Most people don't have a fantastic partner in waiting. And even if they did, if you're getting a divorce, you've got to really play it cool. Because even though you're allowed to have relationships, we don't live in this, Stone Age, but still your partner is going to be very irritated, aggravated, and might get even with you. You know how that is. And you have to be very careful. You have to play it very, very cool. So the key for you is to make sure that you take care of your needs, you take care of the children's needs, you take care of your financial needs, and figure it out first, whether you're left-brained, whether you're right-brained. It's really crucial.
Thank you. To really pay attention to everything, consider all the factors. Wonderful, Susan. Our timing's just right. And I know I'd like to tell everybody that on our next show, Susan, in 2 weeks, will look more deeply into the skills and tools we need to decide whether to go or to stay and what we need to really do in either case. So that's wonderful. I can't wait. Thank you, Susan.
You're welcome.
And I'd love our audience to enjoy Susan Allan's column as the Love and Relationship Coach in the Santa Barbara Family Life magazine. This is now available also online, www.sbfamilylife.com. And please remember that Susan does offer a free 1-hour private telephone consultation. So please contact her for this gift. Susan's phone number is 805-695-8405. And Susan's email is susan@susanallan.org. Susan's YouTube is youtube.com/SusanAllan2001. And here is a great announcement of those who have been asking for Susan to teach the 6-part conversation on a video. The benefits are that this one skill allows you to create more peace, joy, and cooperation in your life, in your business, and in the world every day. You can listen to the replay of Susan's recent teleseminar. The web address is www.youawakening.com/SusanAllan1. So, this is another way of really turning your life and relationships around.
Yay!
Yay. Thank you, Susan. I took notes. And on our show, we are live every Tuesday night from 8 till 9, several times throughout the week as well. We're happily in our 9th year, going strong, maybe 9.5. I'll have to look that up to be exact. And we love hearing from you. It is a joy to us to hear your encouragement and what you have enjoyed about our shows and our wonderful guests. You can go to our website, compassionateconnection.tv. And I'd like to now say thank you to our sponsor at Salon D, Debbie. She is a joy every week. She does hair and makeup. I'm in good hands. Next week we'll be focused on nonviolent communication. And thank you to everyone in the studio here, Matt, Mark, JP, Oscar, and right here our personal TV team, our director Fred Winter, and Tyler Geck on audio and stage support here. And for our viewers, wishing you permanent, countless, continuous, and inescapable compassionate connection.